I'm Armin, 34, an architectural engineer from Boston who designs sustainable buildings for a living. Despite my professional success, my relationship with my family has always been complicated. My parents clearly favored my younger brother from day one, but I thought I'd established enough boundaries as an adult. Then came the bombshell: they sold our family home and gave every penny of the $650,000 to my brother. But that betrayal was just the beginning. When they showed up at my doorstep with luggage, expecting to move in like they owned the place, I had no idea the lengths I'd have to go to reclaim my life. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you've ever dealt with family crossing boundaries, hit that like and subscribe button to join others who've been in similar situations. Growing up in our suburban Massachusetts home, a modest 4-bedroom colonial, with a large backyard and a tire swing, I never quite felt like I belonged. That house with its creaky third stair and the kitchen where the height marks of my brother and me were etched into the doorframe would eventually become central to my parents' ultimate betrayal. My father, Richard, was the stereotypical businessman, always dressed in pressed shirts and slacks, even on weekends. He worked as a sales director for a pharmaceutical company, a job that paid well, but seemed to drain any warmth from his personality. He approached parenting like business transactions, with clear expectations and little room for emotion unless it involved my younger brother. My mother, Judith, a part-time elementary school secretary, lived in my father's shadow. She rarely contradicted him and usually followed his lead in family matters, especially when it came to the disproportionate attention lavished on my brother. Then there was Ethan, 4 years my junior. From the moment he was born, he became the sun around which our family revolved. While I had to earn every privilege through chores and good grades, things simply fell into Ethan's lap. He was the charming athletic child who could talk his way out of trouble with a smile, while I was the serious, studious one who somehow always seemed to disappoint. The pattern of favoritism was established early and reinforced consistently throughout our childhood. When I was 12, I spent weeks perfecting my science fair project about renewable energy sources, building a working solar panel from scratch. The night before the fair, Ethan, then 8, knocked it off the table during one of his indoor football games. Instead of holding him accountable, my parents blamed me for leaving it where it could get broken. I had to scramble overnight to create a subpar replacement, which unsurprisingly didn't place in the competition. My high school graduation was another painful memory. I was valedictorian and had a speech to deliver, but my parents missed half the ceremony because Ethan had a minor league baseball game scheduled the same day. They arrived just as I was leaving the stage, having missed my entire speech. Their explanation was that Ethan needed the support more since he was struggling with his batting average. It didn't matter that this was a once-in-a-lifetime moment for me. The disparity in how gifts were distributed was perhaps the most consistent reminder of my second-tier status. One Christmas when I was 16, I received a pack of socks and a calculator for school, while Ethan unwrapped the latest gaming system with 6 games. When I pointed out the difference, my father simply said, "You're more practical, Armin. Ethan needs more encouragement to stay motivated." Despite the lack of support at home, I threw myself into academics. Perhaps it was to prove my worth, or maybe it was the one area where I could excel without competition from Ethan. My straight A's and extracurricular achievements eventually earned me a partial scholarship to a prestigious university on the West Coast. The distance was a bonus, giving me my first taste of life away from my family's dynamics. College was liberating. For the first time, I was judged on my own merits without comparison to my brother. I worked part-time jobs throughout school, first at the campus bookstore, and later as a teaching assistant for architecture courses. I took summer internships instead of going home building my resume while minimizing family time. Meanwhile, Ethan's path took a different turn. He enrolled in the state university, but dropped out after 3 semesters, claiming the professors didn't understand his learning style. My parents never questioned this, instead funding his second attempt at a different college. That lasted 2 years before he left again, citing a desire to find himself. His third educational attempt was a technical program in computer science, which he abandoned after less than a year. Through all of Ethan's educational detours, my parents provided unwavering financial support. They paid his rent when he wasn't living at home, bought him cars when he crashed them, and funded his various short-lived passions from music production equipment to culinary school supplies. At 26, Ethan had no degree, no steady job, and no apparent concern about his future. Yet my parents continued to enable his lifestyle with an open checkbook and endless excuses. By contrast, I never asked for financial help after leaving for college. Not when my car broke down during my senior year, not when I needed security deposit money for my first apartment, and not when I was stretched thin, paying off student loans, while starting my career. I was determined to make it on my own terms, without obligation to anyone, especially my family. After graduating with honors in architectural engineering, I secured an entry-level position at Williams & Associates, a small but respected firm in Boston. The starting salary was modest, but I was eager to prove myself and build a foundation for my career. I took on every assignment, stayed late to perfect drawings, and volunteered for the projects no one else wanted. My supervisor Brian noticed my dedication and began mentoring me, giving me increasingly complex assignments that stretched my abilities. Those first years were grueling. I worked 60-hour weeks regularly, lived in a tiny studio apartment to save money, and focused entirely on climbing the professional ladder. The sacrifice paid off when, after 3 years, I was promoted to project manager overseeing small to mid-sized commercial builds. Around this time, I began specializing in sustainable design, incorporating energy-efficient elements into my projects before it became mainstream. This specialization eventually became my professional signature, earning recognition from industry publications and bringing in clients specifically interested in green building practices. After 7 years of disciplined saving and careful financial planning, I achieved a goal that once seemed impossible: buying my own home. It wasn't the largest or most luxurious property, but it was exactly what I wanted. A modern 3-bedroom house with clean lines and abundant natural light, situated in a quiet neighborhood with mature trees. The moment I received the keys felt like a personal victory, tangible proof that I had built something substantial without family connections or support. I poured myself into making that house truly mine. I designed custom built-in shelving for my collection of architectural books, installed energy-efficient appliances throughout, and created a home office with a drafting table positioned perfectly under a skylight. The backyard became my weekend project, with a small vegetable garden and a patio area for entertaining. Every corner reflected my aesthetic and priorities, creating a sanctuary where I felt completely at peace. My professional success naturally led to meaningful friendships. Taylor, an interior designer who frequently collaborated with our firm, became one of my closest confidants. Marcus, an attorney specializing in real estate law whom I met during a complicated commercial project, became another trusted friend. We formed a tight circle, often meeting for dinner or hiking trips on weekends. These relationships provided the warmth and support that had been missing from my family life. Dating proved more challenging. Early relationships often faltered when partners couldn't understand my limited family contact or took my reluctance to discuss my childhood as emotional unavailability. Through these experiences, I learned to be more upfront about my family situation and to establish clear boundaries from the beginning. This approach eventually led me to Rachel, a pediatric nurse who had her own complicated family history. She understood my need for space and respected the boundaries I had created without taking it personally. With my own home established and a fulfilling personal life taking shape, I carefully managed my family interactions. I limited visits to major holidays, always staying in hotels rather than the family home, and maintained a pleasant but superficial relationship with my parents. I deliberately kept conversations focused on neutral topics like sports or current events, deflecting personal questions, especially about finances or my career achievements. These strategies allowed me to maintain some family connection without exposing myself to the old patterns that had been so harmful. Rachel, with her professional training in observing behavioral cues, quickly noticed my tension around family interactions. After our second Thanksgiving together, where she witnessed my father dismissing my recent professional award while praising Ethan's temporary job at a friend's startup, she gently suggested I might benefit from talking to someone about these dynamics. Initially resistant, I eventually began seeing Dr. Lindsay, a therapist specializing in family systems. Through our sessions, I gained clarity about patterns. I had normalized the golden child syndrome that elevated Ethan, the emotional neglect I had experienced, and the ways I had adapted to cope with these challenges. Dr. Lindsay helped me develop strategies for maintaining emotional equilibrium during family interactions and processing the lingering hurt from my childhood without letting it define my adult life. With therapy, a fulfilling career, a home of my own, and healthy relationships, I felt I had finally created a life that was secure and balanced. I believed I had found a way to keep my family at a safe distance while building something meaningful on my own terms. I was wrong. The call came on a Tuesday evening, as I was reviewing blueprints for an upcoming project. Seeing my mother's name on the caller ID, I briefly considered letting it go to voicemail. Our monthly check-in wasn't scheduled until the following week. Something compelled me to answer, perhaps the unusual timing. Armin, dear, my mother began with forced cheerfulness. Your father and I have some big family news to share. We'd love for you to come to dinner this Saturday. Her tone carried an undercurrent of excitement that immediately put me on alert. Is everything okay? Is someone sick? I asked, my mind jumping to health concerns given my parents' advancing age. Oh no, nothing like that. It's good news, actually. Something we want to share with you and Ethan together. Against my better judgment, I agreed to drive the 40 minutes to their house that weekend. Rachel offered to come along for moral support, but I declined, thinking it might be easier to maintain emotional distance without her witnessing whatever family drama might unfold. Saturday arrived, and I pulled into the familiar driveway of my childhood home, noting that Ethan's new luxury SUV, undoubtedly another gift from my parents, was already parked in the prime spot nearest the door. Inside, my mother fussed over the table settings while my father poured drinks. Ethan lounged on the sofa, scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging my arrival. Dinner was a strained affair of small talk, and my mother's excessive compliments about her own cooking. Finally, as we moved to the living room for coffee, my father cleared his throat for the announcement. Your mother and I have been thinking about the future. He began, taking her hand in what seemed like a rehearsed gesture. We're not getting any younger, and this house is really too big for us now. So, we've decided to sell it. I nodded, assuming this was a reasonable downsizing decision many people their age made. That makes sense. Have you started looking at smaller places? My father continued as if I hadn't spoken. We closed the sale last week, got $650,000 for it, which was fair given the market. Congratulations, I said, still not seeing why this required a special dinner announcement. So, what's your plan? Are you buying a condo? My mother beamed, looking at Ethan. We're investing in the future, in family. My father nodded proudly. We're giving the money to Ethan for his new business venture. He's got an amazing idea for a tech startup, and this is the capital he needs to make it happen. The room seemed to tilt slightly as I processed his words. The entire proceeds from the sale of our family home, where I had grown up, where every childhood memory was formed, was being handed to my 30-year-old brother, who had never completed anything he started. The whole amount, I managed to ask, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Well, yes, my mother replied, looking confused at my question. Ethan needs the full amount for proper startup costs. It's a competitive industry. And what exactly is this business? I asked, turning to my brother. Ethan straightened up, adopting what I recognized as his pitch voice, the one he used whenever he was trying to convince our parents to fund a new scheme. It's a revolutionary app platform that connects service providers with clients using predictive algorithms and real-time availability tracking, he explained, using technical jargon that I suspected he barely understood himself. Despite his incomplete computer science education, I looked back at my parents. And you're not keeping any of the money for yourselves, for retirement, for emergencies. My father waved dismissively. We have our pensions, and when Ethan's business takes off, we'll be well taken care of. This is an investment in our family's future. Our family's future, I repeated slowly. And was there any consideration of dividing the proceeds? Perhaps including your other son in this family future you're planning. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. My mother shifted in her seat while my father's expression hardened. Armin, you're already established, my mother said softly. You have your career, Your house. Ethan is just getting started. He needs this opportunity. I got started without $650,000 handed to me. I pointed out struggling to keep my tone even. I worked through college, paid my own student loans, saved for years to buy my house. That's exactly it, my father interjected. You've always been self-sufficient. Ethan has a different path. His creativity needs nurturing. His creativity, I repeated. You mean the same creativity that led to 3 unfinished degrees and 0 stable employment history? That's unfair, my mother protested. Ethan just hasn't found the right outlet for his talents yet. And you think throwing more than $500,000 at him with no business plan, no expertise, and no accountability is going to suddenly create responsibility where there's been none before? Ethan rolled his eyes dramatically. Classic Armin, always jealous because mom and dad recognize my potential. I'm not jealous, I said firmly. I'm concerned. This isn't just about money. It's about enabling behavior that hasn't served Ethan well so far. Has anyone seen a business plan, cash flow projections, market analysis? My father's face reddened. We don't need your permission, Armin. The decision is made. We wanted to include you in the family news, not ask for your approval. I took a deep breath, recognizing that nothing I could say would change their minds. I understand. It's your money and your choice how to spend it. I hope it works out the way you envision. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of tension. I left as soon as politeness allowed, declining dessert and making an excuse about an early meeting the next day. The drive home felt endless. My thoughts cycling between anger, hurt, and a strange sense of vindication. This was exactly the kind of preferential treatment I had experienced throughout my childhood, just on a grander scale. When I arrived home, I called Rachel, something I rarely did. So late. She answered immediately, concern evident in her voice. They sold the house, I said without preamble. $650,000. They gave every cent to Ethan for some half-baked business idea. Oh, Armin, she said softly. I'm so sorry. The thing is, I continued, my voice breaking slightly, it's not even about the money. I don't need or want their money. It's the message it sends. After everything, after all these years, nothing has changed. I'm still the afterthought. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to truly feel the pain of my family's dynamics without rationalizing or minimizing it. Rachel listened as I processed decades of unequal treatment, culminating in this ultimate statement of where I stood in the family hierarchy. By the end of the call, I had made a decision. It was time to create even more distance between myself and my family. No more holiday visits, no more monthly check-in calls. If they had made their priorities so abundantly clear, I would adjust my life accordingly. Little did I know that this resolution would be tested far sooner and more dramatically than I could have imagined. For 3 months following the dinner revelation, I maintained minimal contact with my family. My mother's texts received delayed, brief responses. My father's occasional calls went to voicemail, returned days later, with short conversations focused on practical matters only. I declined the Easter gathering, citing work commitments that didn't actually exist. This distance helped me refocus on my own life. A major downtown revitalization project was demanding my full attention at work, and Rachel and I were discussing moving in together within the next year. Through family grapevines, primarily my cousin Samuel, who still kept me updated, despite my distance from the core family, I heard bits about Ethan's business launch. Apparently, he had rented expensive office space in a trendy district, hired several friends as consultants, and was spending lavishly on equipment and company parties. No actual product had materialized yet, but my parents remained enthusiastic cheerleaders, bragging about their son, the tech entrepreneur, to anyone who would listen. I had just begun to feel that I had established a new normal one, where my family's choices affected me less directly, when everything changed on a quiet Sunday morning in June. The doorbell rang at 8:30, as I was enjoying coffee and the newspaper on my patio. Not expecting visitors, I considered ignoring it, but the persistent ringing suggested urgency. When I opened the door, I froze in disbelief. My parents stood on my doorstep, flanked by 4 large suitcases. Behind them, Ethan leaned against his SUV, directing a moving company that was unloading boxes from a small truck parked at the curb. "Surprise!" my mother exclaimed, stepping forward to hug me, as if this were a planned visit. "We're here." I stepped back, avoiding the embrace. "What do you mean here? I didn't know you were coming to town." My father clapped my shoulder. "Not just visiting, son. We're moving in temporarily, just until we find a new place. Shouldn't be more than a few months." The casual way he announced this, as if moving into my home without warning or invitation was perfectly normal, left me momentarily speechless. Moving in, I finally managed. "What happened to your pensions and retirement plans?" My mother's smile faltered slightly. "Well, Ethan's business needed a bit more capital than expected, startup costs and all that. We decided to invest a bit more." "How much more?" I asked, dreading the answer. "We sold the lake cottage," my father replied, referring to their vacation property that had been in the family for generations. "Got a decent price considering the market. Ethan needed it for expansion." I looked past them to where Ethan was pointing authoritatively, instructing the movers where to place boxes that were apparently bound for my home. "And why exactly are you all at my doorstep, with luggage?" My mother's expression turned slightly patronizing, as if explaining something obvious. "Well, we needed somewhere to stay after selling the cottage, and you have all this space, 3 bedrooms for just one person. It makes perfect sense for family to stay together during transitions." "You sold your home and vacation property without securing new housing first?" I asked incredulously. "And you didn't think to ask if I was okay with you moving in?" My father frowned. "Armin, we're family. Family helps each other. We wouldn't have had to ask permission when you were growing up in our house." "I'm not growing up in your house," I said firmly. "I'm a 34-year-old adult, in my own home, that I purchased with my own money." As the conversation grew tenser, I noticed my mother digging through her purse. To my shock, she produced a set of keys to my house, and began sorting through them. "Where did you get those?" I demanded. She looked up, surprised at my tone. "Oh, we had copies made last time we visited. Just in case of emergencies, you know. Now which one was the front door again?" The violation of this simple act, making copies of my house keys without permission, crystallized the entire situation. This wasn't just an unexpected visit or a presumptuous request. This was an invasion planned and executed with the same disregard for my boundaries that had characterized my entire relationship with my family. Before I could formulate a response, Rachel's car pulled into my driveway. We had plans for brunch later, but she had arrived early, a fortunate coincidence that would prove invaluable. Seeing the moving truck and the luggage, she approached with visible confusion. "Armin, what's going on?" she asked, coming to stand beside me. "Apparently my family has decided to move in," I replied, not bothering to hide the tension in my voice. "Without asking." Rachel's eyebrows shot up, but she maintained her composure. "I see. That's unexpected." My father, noting Rachel's presence, adopted a more reasonable tone. "We're just going through a temporary housing situation. Armin has plenty of room here. It's the sensible solution. Maybe we should all go inside and discuss this properly." Rachel suggested, her calm professional demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding on my doorstep. Reluctantly, I agreed, allowing my parents into the living room, but insisting that the movers keep all boxes and luggage outside until we reached an agreement. Ethan slouched in after us, immediately making himself comfortable on my sofa and eyeing my entertainment system with evaluative interest. "Let me be clear," I began once everyone was seated. "I was not consulted about this arrangement. I did not agree to it. And I'm not comfortable with the assumption that my home is available for indefinite family occupation." "It's not indefinite," my mother protested. "Just until we find something suitable. Maybe 3 or 4 months at most." "That's not the point," I countered. "The point is that this decision was made without any consideration for my input or consent. You made copies of my keys without asking. You showed up with moving trucks without warning." "You're being dramatic," Ethan interjected. "It's not like we're strangers. We're your family." "Family asks permission," Rachel stated simply. "Family respects boundaries." My father turned to her with a dismissive wave. "With all due respect, this is a family matter. Armin knows his responsibilities to his parents. My responsibilities, I repeated. Like the responsibility you showed when you gave every cent from our family home to Ethan, without a second thought about fairness or prudent financial planning. The conversation continued, in circles, for over an hour. My parents alternated between guilt trips. After all, we've done for you appeals to family duty. Family sticks together in hard times, and minimizing my concerns. It's just for a little while. Ethan contributed little besides occasional eye-rolling and comments about upgrading various elements of my basic home decor. Throughout the discussion, I maintained a clear position. While I would help them find alternative accommodations, they would not be moving into my home. When my father began talking about how they'd convert my home office into their bedroom, I realized just how entitled they felt to my space and my life. By the end of the conversation, I had agreed to one concession: they could stay for 3 days while they found a short-term rental. 3 days with clear house rules, and absolutely no moving in of furniture or belongings beyond essential overnight items. It was more than they deserved given their presumption, but with Rachel's supportive presence, I found the strength to establish and maintain this boundary without giving in to the emotional manipulation that had worked so effectively in the past. As my parents finally left to inform the movers of the revised plan, Rachel squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. That wasn't easy. She was right. It wasn't easy. And as I would soon discover, it was only the beginning of a boundary battle that would test me in ways I never anticipated. Despite the clear 3-day limit I had established, my parents showed no signs of actually looking for alternative housing. By the evening of their arrival, my mother had unpacked her suitcase in my guest bedroom, arranging her toiletries in the bathroom, and hanging clothes in the closet as if settling in for an extended stay. My father spent the afternoon rearranging my living room furniture to improve the flow, despite my repeated requests to leave things as they were. Ethan, who had ostensibly come only to help his parents move, announced at dinner that he'd be crashing for a few days too, since his apartment was being fumigated. This was the first I'd heard of any such plan, and when I questioned the convenient timing, he simply shrugged and said, "Lucky coincidence, bro." That first night set the tone for what would become an increasingly uncomfortable living situation. My mother took over the kitchen, criticizing my bachelor pantry and rearranging my carefully organized cabinets. My father commandeered the television, tuning into sports channels at maximum volume. Ethan made business calls in the hallway until midnight, loudly discussing investor relations and capital acquisition strategies in what seemed like deliberately technical jargon. I retreated to my bedroom, the only space, still fully my own, feeling like a stranger in the home I had worked so hard to create. Rachel called to check on me, offering again to let me stay at her place, but I declined. Somehow, leaving felt like conceding defeat in a battle I hadn't asked for but couldn't afford to lose. The next morning brought fresh boundary violations. I woke to find my mother had invited my Aunt Julia and Uncle Frank over for breakfast without informing me. They looked almost as surprised to see me emerging from my bedroom as I was to find them seated at my dining table. "Armin," Aunt Julia exclaimed. "Your mother didn't mention you'd be here." "I live here," I replied flatly. "This is my house." An awkward silence followed, broken by my mother, cheerfully offering me coffee, as if this were her home, and I the unexpected guest. After the uncomfortable breakfast, I discovered that my father had been using my home office without permission. My drafting table had been pushed aside to make room for his laptop, and several of my professional reference books had been stacked haphazardly on the floor. More disturbingly, I found him looking through a folder of personal documents I kept in my desk drawer. "What are you doing?" I demanded from the doorway. He looked up without a hint of embarrassment. "Just getting some work done. Needed to find a pen, so I looked in your desk. By the way, you should really organize these insurance documents better. I could help you set up a proper filing system." The casual invasion of my privacy left me seething, but with relatives still in the house, I chose to address it later rather than create a scene. I closed the office door firmly, telling my father I needed the space for an urgent work project, and left for Rachel's apartment to clear my head. Rachel's reaction to the unfolding situation was a mixture of disbelief and concern. "Armin, this isn't normal," she emphasized, as I recounted the morning's events. "Making copies of your keys, inviting people to your home without permission, Going through your personal documents, these are serious boundary violations. I know, I admitted, but they're only supposed to be here for 2 more days. I can handle it until then. Rachel gave me a skeptical look. Are you sure they're planning to leave? Because it sounds like they're settling in, not preparing to move out. Her observation proved prescient. When I returned home that evening, I found additional boxes had been moved into my guest room and hallway while I was out. My mother had replaced several of my kitchen appliances with her own, claiming hers were better quality. My father had disconnected my smart home system because he found the automated lighting confusing. Confronting them only led to dismissive responses and accusations that I was being unwelcoming to family during their time of transition. When I reminded them of our 3-day agreement, my mother teared up and asked if I really expected them to move into a strange hotel when family should support each other. The situation deteriorated further over the next week. Yes, week. Despite my increasingly firm reminders about our agreement, my parents showed no signs of leaving. Each day brought new invasions of my space and privacy. My mother redirected my mail to include her and my father's names on my address without consulting me, resulting in their bills and correspondence being delivered to my home. My father accessed my personal computer while I was at work, later casually referencing details from emails he could only have seen by snooping through my accounts. My mother rearranged my bedroom closet because she thought it was inefficiently organized, throwing away clothing items she deemed worn out without asking. Ethan, who was supposedly staying only briefly, invited friends over for a small gathering that turned into 20 people, loudly occupying my living room and patio until 2 in the morning. My breaking point came after 8 days of this progressive invasion. Rachel had been urging me to take more definitive action, and Marcus, my attorney friend, had expressed concern about the potential legal complications of allowing family members to establish residency in my home without a formal agreement. I returned from work earlier than usual one afternoon to find my parents had removed several framed architectural awards from my office walls. These awards represented significant professional achievements and were important to me both personally and professionally. When I asked where they were, my mother casually mentioned they had been stored in the garage because my father needed the wall space for his own certificates and family photos. "We're making the office more functional for everyone," she explained, as if this were a reasonable modification to make to someone else's home office. As I stood there absorbing this latest violation, I overheard a conversation between my father and Ethan in the kitchen. They were discussing Ethan's business finances, which were apparently already in trouble despite the massive investment. "The initial investor meetings didn't go as planned," Ethan was saying. "They're asking for projections and user testing data we don't have yet." "Don't worry," my father replied reassuringly. "We'll figure something out. Maybe Armin could contribute some capital. He's doing well financially, and it would be a good investment opportunity for him." "He's always been selfish with money," Ethan responded. "But maybe Mom can convince him. He never says no to her for long." The realization hit me like a physical blow. Not only had they invaded my home under false pretenses, with no intention of leaving within the agreed time frame, but they were now plotting to draw me into financially supporting Ethan's failing business venture. The same business that had already consumed their entire housing equity and retirement security. This wasn't just about uncomfortable living arrangements anymore. This was about a fundamental lack of respect for my boundaries, my space, and my autonomy. Something had to change, and it had to change immediately. That evening, after confirming that my architectural awards had indeed been unceremoniously boxed and stacked in the garage, I called Marcus. As both a friend and a real estate attorney, he was uniquely positioned to advise me on the situation that had spiraled beyond my control. "They've been there how long now?" Marcus asked, after I explained the circumstances. 9 days, I replied. 6 days longer than agreed upon, with no signs of looking for their own place. "That's concerning," he said, his professional tone taking over. "In most jurisdictions, allowing someone to stay in your home for 30 days can establish tenancy rights, making formal eviction necessary if they refuse to leave." Eviction. I repeated the word, feeling strange, in relation to my own parents. "It hasn't come to that yet, has it?" "Maybe not legally," Marcus conceded, "but Armin, what you're describing is a systematic invasion of your personal space, and violation of your boundaries. Making unauthorized copies of your keys, accessing your personal documents, and computer redirecting mail, removing your belongings from walls. These aren't the actions of respectful houseguests. He advised me to document everything: the original agreement, all subsequent boundary violations, any property being moved in or altered, and to clearly communicate in writing my expectations for their departure. If they're acting in good faith, this should be sufficient, he explained. If not, you'll have documentation should legal steps become necessary. That night I drafted a formal letter stating that while I cared for my family, the current living arrangement was not working and they needed to find alternative accommodations within 7 days. I listed several nearby extended stay hotels and short-term rental options, even offering to pay for the first week to ease the transition. I printed 3 copies and left them on the kitchen counter before leaving early for work the next morning, avoiding what I anticipated would be an uncomfortable confrontation. When I returned home that evening, the atmosphere was glacial. My mother had been crying, evidenced by her reddened eyes. My father sat stone-faced in the living room, the letter crumpled beside him. Ethan was nowhere to be seen, having apparently gone out to avoid the tension. "I can't believe you would treat your own parents this way," my father began without preamble. "After everything we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me recently?" I asked quietly. "Made copies of my keys without permission. Gone through my personal documents, removed my professional awards from my walls, invited people into my home without asking. Planned to try to extract money from me for Ethan's business." My mother gasped. "You were eavesdropping on private conversations." "In my kitchen," I pointed out. "In my home, which you entered without invitation and have refused to leave despite clear agreements." "We're your parents," my father said, as if this single fact trumped all other considerations. "You owe us respect." "Respect is mutual," I replied, "and it involves acknowledging boundaries. I've provided options and even offered financial assistance for your transition. I'm not throwing you out onto the street." The conversation deteriorated from there, with my parents alternating between guilt trips, accusations of selfishness, and reminders of childhood incidents when they had supposedly sacrificed for me. When logical arguments failed to move me, my mother switched tactics, clutching her chest and claiming the stress was aggravating her blood pressure condition, a condition I had never heard mentioned before. By the end of the evening, it was clear that despite my formal request and offered assistance, my parents had no intention of willingly leaving my home. Their sense of entitlement to my space, combined with what I now recognized as genuine financial desperation after investing everything in Ethan's failing business, made them determined to entrench themselves further rather than seek independence. The next day, on Marcus's advice, I consulted with a lawyer specializing in landlord-tenant law. She confirmed what Marcus had suggested, given that my family had now stayed for 10 days, had moved in personal belongings, and had redirected mail to my address. They were establishing a legal residence claim. If I wanted to ensure they left before tenant rights fully vested, formal action would be necessary. With a heavy heart but firm resolve, I initiated the legal process. A formal eviction notice was prepared, citing the lack of lease agreement, the temporary nature of the originally agreed-upon stay, and the numerous violations of household rules and personal boundaries. The notice gave my parents 7 days to vacate the premises, after which legal enforcement would be sought. I arranged for the papers to be served while I was at work, wanting to avoid the immediate emotional fallout. When the server arrived, he documented the delivery with photographs and confirmation signatures, providing the legal proof necessary for any subsequent proceedings. The reaction was swift and dramatic. My phone exploded with texts from my mother ranging from, "How could you do this to your own family?" to, "There must be some horrible mistake," to, "Please call immediately, your father is devastated." Ethan left a voicemail calling me heartless and selfish, threatening vague consequences for tearing the family apart. I did not respond immediately, giving myself time to center my emotions and consult with both Rachel and Dr. Lindsay, my therapist. Dr. Lindsay validated my decision to enforce boundaries, emphasizing that healthy family relationships require mutual respect, not sacrifice of personal well-being. Rachel offered practical support, suggesting she be present when I returned home to provide both emotional backing and a witness to any confrontations. When I did return that evening with Rachel beside me, My parents had shifted from outrage to manipulation. My mother tearfully claimed physical ailments, suggesting the stress might require hospitalization. My father alternated between cold silence and pointed comments about children abandoning parents in their time of need. Ethan was once again absent, though his possessions had multiplied in the guest room, suggesting he was settling in rather than preparing to leave. For 2 more days, the psychological warfare continued. Extended family members began calling, having been told a carefully edited version of events that cast me as cruelly evicting my elderly parents without cause or warning. Childhood family friends reached out with concern, asking if I was going through something that would explain my unusual behavior. Through it all, I maintained my position. The eviction notice stood. The deadline was firm, and while I would help them transition to new housing, my home was no longer available to them. Each night, Rachel stayed over, providing both emotional support and serving as a buffer against the worst manipulations. As the deadline approached with no signs of packing or preparation for departure, I made a difficult but necessary decision. Following legal advice, I arranged for a locksmith to come while my parents were out shopping. With Rachel and Marcus present as witnesses, the locks were changed on all exterior doors, and the garage door opener was reprogrammed. I packed my parents' essential belongings into suitcases, placing them neatly in the garage where they could be accessed without entering the house. I changed my Wi-Fi password and home security codes. For Ethan's increasingly numerous possessions, I arranged temporary storage, prepaying for 1 month and providing the access information in a sealed envelope. When my parents returned and found themselves unable to enter with their unauthorized keys, the confrontation I had been bracing for finally erupted on my front lawn. My mother wailed about betrayal and abandonment. My father threatened legal action. Neighbors began peering out windows at the commotion. Anticipating this reaction, I had arranged for a police officer to be present as a precautionary measure. The officer calmly explained that this was a civil matter, not criminal, but their presence ensured the situation didn't escalate beyond verbal confrontation. With Rachel and Marcus flanking me, I explained that hotel accommodations had been arranged for 7 nights at my expense, giving my parents ample time to secure longer-term housing. "You can't do this," my father insisted, his face flushed with anger. "We're your parents. This is illegal." Actually, Mr. Walsh Marcus interjected professionally as a property owner. "Armin has the right to determine who lives in his home. The temporary accommodation he's offering exceeds any legal obligation." After nearly an hour of tense exchanges with the police officer maintaining a watchful presence, my parents finally accepted the hotel arrangement as their immediate option. As they departed in a taxi with their essential belongings, my mother turned back with a final emotional plea. "How will you live with yourself after treating your family this way?" I had no perfect answer, only the certainty that establishing these boundaries was necessary for my own well-being and long overdue in our family dynamic. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in weeks, I could close my front door and feel that my home was truly mine again. The immediate aftermath of the eviction was both a relief and a source of profound discomfort. My home was physically mine again, with Rachel helping me restore the spaces my family had disrupted. We rehung my architectural awards, reorganized my office, and reset the furniture to its original arrangement. Yet, emotionally, I grappled with waves of guilt, second-guessing, and familial obligation that had been ingrained since childhood. As promised, I covered 1 week of hotel accommodations for my parents, selecting a comfortable extended-stay property with kitchenettes and living areas. I also provided contact information for several rental agencies specializing in short-term leases and senior living communities. Whether they utilized these resources remained their choice, but I had fulfilled my commitment to ease their transition while maintaining my boundaries. The family reaction was predictably divided. Some relatives understood my position once they heard the full story, particularly those who had experienced my parents' boundary issues themselves. Others took my parents' side without question, bombarding me with messages about family loyalty and filial duty. I responded selectively, explaining my position to those open to hearing it and muting communications from those who simply wanted to intensify guilt. Approximately 2 months after the eviction news reached me through cousin Samuel that Ethan's business had collapsed completely. Despite the massive investment from our parents, the company had failed to develop a viable product or attract additional investors. The office space had been abandoned with rent unpaid, and several employees were pursuing wage claims. Ethan had apparently moved to a friend's couch, leaving my parents to deal with the financial fallout. This development created a new wave of attempted contact from my parents, though the tone had shifted from anger to desperation. My father, who had always projected an image of financial stability and business acumen, sent an email acknowledging some miscalculations in their retirement planning and suggesting we discuss family financial strategies together. Reading between the lines, it was clear they were in serious financial trouble and looking to me as a potential solution. After consulting with both Dr. Lindsay and Rachel, I composed a careful response. I expressed sympathy for their difficult situation, but clearly stated that I would not be providing direct financial support. Instead, I offered to connect them with a financial advisor who specialized in retirement recovery strategies and enclosed information about credit counseling services. It was more help than many would offer after their behavior, but less than the bailout they clearly hoped for. Months passed with minimal contact. Through the family grapevine, I learned that my parents had eventually rented a small two-bedroom apartment in a modest neighborhood, a significant downgrade from the spacious colonial home they had owned for decades. My father had taken a part-time consulting position to supplement their reduced income, while my mother had apparently joined a church group that provided emotional support during their challenging time. Ethan's situation remained chaotic, bouncing between friends' couches and short-term rentals, still pursuing vague business ideas, but finding investors understandably reluctant after his previous failure. He occasionally attempted to contact me for brotherly support, which I recognized as code for financial assistance, but I maintained firm boundaries while keeping communications civil. 6 months after the eviction, I received an unexpected letter from my mother. Unlike her previous communications, which had been emotional manipulations, thinly disguised as maternal concern, this letter seemed genuinely reflective. She acknowledged that their behavior in my home had been inappropriate, admitted that their financial decisions regarding Ethan had been clouded by emotional bias, and expressed regret for the lifelong pattern of favoritism that had damaged our relationship. I always thought we were just supporting Ethan because he needed more help, she wrote. I never considered that by focusing so much on his needs, we were sending you the message that yours didn't matter. Seeing your beautiful home and successful life made me realize how much you accomplished without our support. And perhaps I was resentful of that independence because it highlighted our failure with Ethan. This doesn't excuse our behavior, but I hope it helps explain it. While I approached this apparent epiphany with caution, therapy had taught me to recognize genuine attempts at amends. After discussing it with Dr. Lindsay, I agreed to meet my mother for coffee at a neutral location. Our conversation was awkward but constructive, establishing a tentative framework for a new, more boundaried relationship moving forward. My father took longer to come around. His pride had been deeply wounded by both the financial collapse of Ethan's business and the public nature of the eviction. Eventually, however, economic reality forced a reassessment of his position. During a brief phone call on his birthday, he gruffly acknowledged that my financial independence was commendable and admitted that perhaps they had overindulged Ethan to his detriment. Coming from my father, this qualified as a significant concession. While our relationship remained distant, the acknowledgement opened the door to occasional civil interactions at major family gatherings where we carefully maintained the polite distance of respectful acquaintances rather than presuming the intimacy of close family. Ethan's journey toward accountability proved more challenging. Despite the business failure and subsequent financial hardship, he maintained that external factors, rather than his own choices, had caused the collapse. He alternated between blaming market conditions, disloyal employees, and unsupportive investors, never quite acknowledging his lack of preparation or business acumen. During a tense Thanksgiving dinner at my Aunt Julia's house, where we found ourselves seated at the same table for the first time since the eviction, Ethan made a pointed comment about some people having all the luck in reference to my recent promotion. Rather than engaging with the bait, I simply replied, "Preparation and persistence aren't luck, Ethan. They're choices we make every day." The conversation moved on, but the contrast between our approaches to life had never been clearer to those witnessing the exchange. Throughout this period of family recalibration, Rachel remained my steadfast support. Her professional experience with family systems gave her insight into the dynamics at play, while her personal warmth provided emotional grounding during difficult interactions. Our relationship deepened through the crisis, and 8 months after the eviction, we decided to move in together, choosing to sell my house and purchase a new home that would be truly ours, without the lingering energy of the family. Invasion. My healing journey wasn't linear. Some days I felt confident in my decisions and boundaries. Other days, ingrained guilt would resurface, questioning whether I had been too harsh or unforgiving. Dr. Lindsay helped me recognize these moments as the echo of childhood conditioning rather than genuine moral concerns. Family obligation should never require the sacrifice of your dignity or well-being. She reminded me during a particularly difficult session. Healthy love has boundaries. 1 year after the eviction, my relationship with my parents had settled into a new pattern. We spoke monthly by phone, met occasionally for holidays or significant events, but always in public places or the homes of other relatives. I never visited their apartment, and they never asked to visit our new home, an unspoken agreement that seemed to benefit everyone's comfort level. Ethan remained more distant, our interactions limited to group family events where civility could be maintained through the buffer of other relatives. While he never directly acknowledged his role in the family crisis, he had stopped asking for financial help, perhaps recognizing the futility of such requests given our established boundaries. My parents gradually adjusted to their new financial reality, with my father working part-time well into what should have been his retirement years. While I felt sympathy for their situation, I recognized that intervening financially would only perpetuate unhealthy patterns. Instead, I occasionally sent information about senior resources or discount programs they might qualify for, offering practical support without financial entanglement. The experience transformed my understanding of family. Blood relation, I realized, didn't automatically confer the right to demand sacrifice or ignore boundaries. True family, whether biological or chosen, was built on mutual respect, recognition of each person's autonomy, and support that empowered rather than enabled. Rachel and I created new traditions with our circle of friends, hosting summer barbecues and holiday gatherings that filled our home with warmth and genuine connection. Taylor and Marcus remained central figures in our lives, along with other friends who demonstrated the healthy give and take of balanced relationships. These connections provided the family feeling I had always craved but rarely experienced with my biological relatives. Looking back at the journey from invasion to boundaries to healing, I recognize that the crisis, while painful, forced necessary growth and clarity. By standing firm in my right to protect my space and well-being, I established not only physical boundaries, but also emotional ones that allowed for healthier relationships across all areas of my life. The lesson wasn't that family doesn't matter, but rather that healthy family relationships require mutual respect and reciprocity. Sometimes the most loving action, both for yourself and ultimately for others, is to say no to dysfunction and yes to boundaries that allow everyone the dignity of their own choices and consequences. If you've ever faced similar challenges with family boundaries, remember that you're not alone. Your home is your sanctuary, and you have every right to protect it. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply close your door and honor your own worth.